Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Comic Book Time podcast. My name is Aaron, and we are going to review comics for the week of July 3rd. Yes, July 3rd. So, what the deal is, there are some comics on the screen. Click those, it'll take you to the part in the review. If you just want to see it from start to finish, go for it. And definitely enjoy the show. Our first comic book is Action Comics, issue number 22. This is written by Scott Lobdell, and we have a new artist, or actually a whole new creative team since Tony S. Daniel and Andy Diggle left back in issue number 21. Yes. So now it's just a new story arc, and we have a new artist as well, Tyler Kirkham. Definitely not Robert Kirkman. But anyways, and it's a completely new team, so how did they do? I think they did pretty good for the most part. This was definitely a solid issue. I'm definitely... I'm not as interested to see where this goes, but, you know, it could go to places that might be pretty cool. So I'm definitely going to pick up issue number 23. I think what made this issue interesting were some of the... when it seems like they're trying to develop too many plot points. Like one point, Clark notices that that a actor who's at this party has a sort of android body frame, and then he completely ignores that and just go to help Hector Hammond, who makes an appearance in this to deal with a new guy who has recently come out from some sort of teleportation device. So there's a whole bunch of different plot points and mysteries, but they never really flesh that out, but hopefully they will soon. So I'm going to give Action Comics issue number 22 a 3.5 out of 5. Alright, so our next comic book is Trinity of Sin, Pandora, issue number 1. This is going to be our prelude to the massive event, Trinity Wars. Justice League versus Justice League Dark versus Justice League of America. So let's get into the comic. What did I think about it? I thought it was really good. If you've been keeping up with Justice League and some of their backup issues, we've been dealing a lot with this character who we don't know a lot about, and that would be Pandora. And this issue, this comic is kind of like her. I would say it would be her origin story, almost, because we see what happens to her and how she becomes who she is today and what she has to deal with. So it starts out, she finds a skull when trying to pick for berries for her child and her clan. It starts out in 8000 BCE. So once she picks the skull, she basically unleashes the 7 deadly sins onto the world. So, obviously, we know what that is, but they're actually embodied into actual creatures. They're demons. So, greed, so at one point, I'll give an example, greed would be, you know, kind of like whispering in the ear of the pharaohs as he's pulling the slaves, and they're working the slaves. And there's another example of every time there's a war happening, you'll see wrath there, and throughout history and time, we see all the different 7 deadly sins, interacting with humanity, and they're immortal. And then we see Pandora's journey, and it's really interesting. And since this will be a prelude, we kind of get in before Trinity War, before Justice League issue number 22. So we see that Pandora's on a mission to get the skull, and she wants to rid the world of the 7 deadly sins, which I think is a really cool concept, and I'm definitely looking forward to this comic book. It switched artists. There's different artists on this comic throughout different pages, which I kind of don't like, usually, but the good thing is that it's pretty consistently good throughout the whole thing. So I'm going to give Trinity of Sin Pandora, issue number 1, a 4.5 out of 5. I thought it was great, and I'm really excited for Trinity Wars. Okay, so our next comic book is Batman 66. So this is basically the digital comic that is based off the classic 1966 show with Adam West. So we have Jeff Parker and Jonathan Case, both the scriptwriter and the artist. And I have to say, this comic book, this new comic book series, is incredible. I mean, they take the show and they put it into comic book form, but it still feels like I'm actually reading or even watching the TV show. It's incredible. The art is phenomenal. The writing is exactly like the show. If you're a fan of the classic show, you're going to love this comic book. Guaranteed. This is so much innovation in this comic book because you have scenes where when you switch, you get the classic like crunch or bam or pow come up when Batman hits someone, or when Robin throws a batarang. You hear the soup, and then you see the giant lettering come out there. And art is fantastic as usual. Writing is exactly like what the TV show. It pulls from classic lines from the TV show. And even at the end of the comic, they have a find out next time segment. I mean, it's incredible. It's just like the show. And everything about this comic book is phenomenal. And I highly recommend Batman 66. Even if you're not a fan of the show, and if you are a fan of the show, you'll still love it regardless. I mean, this is probably the most fun I've had. Out of all the comics I've read this week so far, I think Batman 66, Chapter 1 or Part 1, is the most fun I've had in this entire week so far. And this is incredible, and I'm really excited to pick up to see more stories with this. And it's going to follow a format, I think, instead of a one villain per week, I think it's going to be a one villain per issue. So 3 parts of one villain. And I think it's going to be incredible. I was so impressed with this chapter. I'm going to give Batman 66 a 5 out of 5. A well-deserved 5 out of 5. This comic book is incredible. Pick it up. And our next comic book is Dexter, issue number 1. So what did I think of Dexter, issue number 1? I thought for the most part I definitely enjoyed it. I think what makes this book, pretty good. This is going to be a limited series 5 issue run. And I think what makes it good is we have the writing and the dialogue. The art is okay, but again, going back to the writing, we have the writer of the books, Jeff Lindsay, doing the writing for this comic book, and it's nice to see him branch out from the novels and actually support a Dexter title fully and actually write it. So that's always nice. So the main gist of the story. We see Dexter dealing with his high school reunion. He goes to his high school reunion with Rita. He's a bit hesitant to go, and when he's there, he sees one of his most hated enemies in high school, this new character called Steven Gonzalez, and we see what Dexter did in order to kind of stop him from bullying. And there's this kind of mystery revolving around Steve Gonzalez and how he suddenly, out of nowhere, is completely fine with what Dexter did to him when he was in high school. And, of course, there's this other mystery of 2 murdered bums, hobos, being killed and left outside of the mission that was created by Steve Gonzalez himself. So there's I think some of my theories would probably be maybe he's a serial killer. So we're going to have to see in issue number 2. But the art is alright. It's definitely decent enough. I like how the artist draws the dark passenger. That's very nice. That's one good thing. Bad? The art is okay. That would be the only bad. But the writing and dialogue, everything's fine. I'm going to give Dexter issue number 1 a 4 out of 5. I'm definitely interested to see where this limited series goes. Our next comic book is Avengers AI issue number 1. This is a new series basically that spun off of Age of Ultron. And this is probably going to be the age of AI. So we have the Avengers AI, and after the fallout of Age of Ultron, we see that Hank Pym is getting together his own team because basically what happens, the main story is that there's a virus that was kind of created from Ultron while he was while Hank Pym tried to destroy Ultron. I guess the virus that killed Ultron has now gone rogue, and it's called Demetrio. So basically, this virus has taken over like military weapons, so like unmanned jets, different stuff like that. So it's attacking civilians and trying to do what Ultron couldn't do, which is eradicate the human race, and it starts by attacking this hospital in Atlanta. So the first part is we see Hank Pym being recruited by Shield in order to say we need to stop this virus or else it's gonna kill a lot of innocent people. And Hank Pym gets the vision, and he also gets Victor Mancha and the Vision, which is his brother. And we see that Hank Pym actually introduces the Doombot that he has in his lab, and that's really interesting. The team itself is kind of strange, but it's really fun at the same time. I think what makes this issue really strange and fun is that they're AI, and quite frankly, they have a lot of humor, and it's almost like that kind of like robotic humor. Like they're trying to be human, which I think is funny in its own way. And we can talk about the art. I think the art is very nice. Definitely in a unique way that the artist draws people's faces and the characters. Definitely good use of color. The action scenes are great. One of the things I thought was a little bit strange, I guess would be my only gripe with the comic, is that Hank Pym didn't actually fight with his Avengers team for the first time in this issue. It was just Doombot, the Vision, and Victor. But regardless, I'm going to give Avengers AI issue number 1 a 4 out of 5. Definitely solid start to a interesting title. And our next comic book is Daredevil Dark Knights issue number 2. I really enjoyed the first issue. I thought it was great. I gave it a 5 out of 5 if you haven't caught some of the previous podcasts. But anyways, we still continue our story from where we left off. Daredevil, Matt Murdock, still braving the blizzard, trying to get the donor heart for Hannah, the girl that he was in the hospital, that he was at. And I think what really makes this series great is that we have the artist and the writer being the same person, Lee Weeks, back doing Daredevil. And I think his art and his dialogue, his monologue with Daredevil it's phenomenal. It's great. I mean, really, this is a really strong issue. It wasn't as good as the first one, but it was still great. The thing that's really I think is going to bring in people is the art, and the writing's very nice. There may be a little bit too much monologue, but that's all right. That really fleshes out some of the monologue in specific places works better than other places. The monologue would do better in certain places, of course, but sometimes it works most times it works. In a few parts it doesn't. But regardless, the art is over the top, fantastic. I mean, it's really great when you have someone writing and doing the art. And essentially the story is that in this one, Daredevil continues to try to find the helicopter that crashes. He does find it, saves 2 pilots, and then he tries to make his way back to the hospital. We also have the father, Simon, uh, the father of Hannah, trying to call in favors from the Daily Bugle and different other organizations to try to get the heart in itself. And there's all these. We have that storyline, and then we also have a lot of different themes of hope, which I really appreciated, and I thought was some great themes. So I think overall I'm going to give Daredevil Dark Knights a 4.5 out of 5. This continues to be a excellent and exciting title, and you should definitely pick it up. Our next comic book is The Superior Foes of Spider-Man. These are all the foes of the Superior Spider-Man run that's happening right now. So let's talk about this comic right now. So we get this is a new team-up book, which is based off the new Sinister Six, featuring Boomerang, Speed Demon, Shocker, and Overdrive. Yes, that's the whole team. So it's funny because even in the comic it says that even though there's 5 people, that they're still calling themselves the City of Six, or the Sinister Six. And so what I think made this comic book pretty damn good is the writing. We have the writer Nick Spencer. He really made me laugh throughout this whole issue. It's kind of funny because he's sort of writing the dialogue and sort of playing, bouncing off the jokes of this is a kind of B-list team of supervillains, and the villains themselves even know that they're not like top tier. The dialogue is really witty. Boomerang's monologue he has throughout the comic is really great. Really funny dialogue, very witty, definitely enjoyable to read. The art is by, I believe, how do you say his name? Steve Lieber. He does the art for this comic, and he's really good at drawing the actual not necessarily the backgrounds, but he does a good job at setting up different panels in a certain way. The paneling is really good in this. The art's pretty good. It's definitely not great or like amazing for any standard, but it's definitely serviceable, and it definitely works for this type of tone and what they're trying to get with in this comic. And everything definitely works. I mean, this is a really fun comic book, and I definitely had a good laugh reading this, and I think you will too. So I'm going to give The Superior Foes of Spider-Man a 4 out of 5. And our next comic book is Satellite Sam, issue number 1, a new series from Image Comics with writer Matt Fraction from, as you well know, is Hawkeye, Marvel Now's Hawkeye, and Howard Clayton doing the art. So let me start off by saying the art in this is fantastic. This is, in fact, a black and white comic, and I think it really does well to establish the atmosphere of the comic book series. So the setting of this entire comic book series ends in the New York during the 1950s. And we meet up with, we see that there's a live broadcast television studio, and we see how they really portray the studio and the employees. They work really hard. Their job's extremely complicated, and it's really interesting to see the dynamic of the team, how they work, how they get their show done, and the show being Satellite Sam. We get some more kind of political drama dealing with different stations like NBC and CBS, different rival companies and the kind of politics there. But it all comes down to the shows, and we have one of the shows, Satellite Sam, is the main focus. And I really wouldn't be spoiling anything because they say it in the description, and in basically the cover has it. Carlisle White has been murdered, and it is kind of like a old style noir murder mystery. And by the end of this, there's a very interesting mystery that goes along that I'm very intrigued to see what happens. So why I think people are going to pick up Satellite Sam, and why you should definitely pick up Satellite Sam, is the art is retro, but also modern at the same time. And Matt Fraction's writing is definitely going to provide some interesting background, and it's going to be a nice period piece. And I think there's going to be a lot of interesting mysteries and conflicts that are going to happen to make this a really great series. So I'm going to give Satellite Sam a 5 out of 5. Definitely pick this up. And our final comic book of the Comic Book Time podcast is 10 Grand, issue number 3. We have writer Michael J. Straczynski, and artist Ben Temple Smith. So from the fallout from the second issue, we saw that Debbie is now dead, and we get the fallout of that. But now Joe has to set his sights on the divine will, the cult that Debbie's sister was involved in. So we see, we actually get a lot of flashback moments, which I really appreciated. It definitely helps to strengthen the Joe and Laura relationship, and it is a really nice one too. It's definitely interesting how they meet. Joe and Laura met on one of Joe's hits, and it was definitely interesting. A couple of pages were flashbacks of how they met and how they bonded and what led them to falling in love. And that was very nice, very touching. The writing in this is really nice. The art increases to get even better and better, and the last few pages there's some very well written demons, or very well drawn pictures of demons, and I have to say the art in this is really good. It's getting amazing. What else? The covers are great. The cover for issue number 4 looks incredible. I mean, really just sums up the whole book in that one cover. And the story so far is going at a really nice pace, and I definitely like the supernatural elements of this comic, and I'm really intrigued with the story. It's definitely a really cool premise. And if you haven't checked out 10 Grand, I really recommend you do. We're only in 3 issues, so definitely pick up the first 2 and then this one this week and catch up. You will definitely not regret it. I'm giving 10 Grand a 4.5 out of 5. Definitely pick up this series. And that's it for the Comic Book Time podcast. Make sure to like and subscribe. Also, you can check out the previous Comic Book Time podcast by clicking the annotation. Also, check me out on the Marvel Talk, which is on the Podcast Central 1 YouTube channel. Make sure you go subscribe to those guys. I did a segment on their show called Marvel Talk, and we were talking about the status of Brian Michael Bendis' run on Guardians of the Galaxy. And as always, thank you for watching.